everyone, I'm Jack Watson, UI UX designer, illustrator, animator, donut connoisseur. Welcome to Adobe Live and our first typography challenge for December. We're working on a halftone effect today using type, and to get started, in the description below this video, you'll see a link to download your starter file to work along with us. In Illustrator, I put together a number of things for you, but to get started, I put together, where'd my guides go? There we go. I put together this template for you of a postcard. We're going to be making a postcard today, and we're going to be focusing on the front here, the image side, but if you wanted to kind of go above and beyond, and you could add the back here, so you could add the stamp, you could add the copy for like a handwritten note, so feel free to go ahead and do that. I've got these pink lines on here are guides. And you can very easily, in the layers panel down here, using this little eye icon next to your layer, the one that says guides, you can turn them on or off if you don't want to see them. They're just there for your reference. When you save this file out, they're not going to be visible, but I just thought it would be helpful to kind of show you where all of the elements would go, where you need to have your stamp, the mailing address, the barcode for the post office. So, like I said, we're going to be focusing on this side. Other than that, I've got a color palette for you if you want to go ahead and use that, as well as some notes that just talk about what we're going to be doing today and the tools we're going to be using, along with some additional resources for you to browse at your leisure. But to get started, we're going to be picking a font, because obviously this is type focused. So we've got to head over to fonts.adobe.com. And once we're over there, this is what the website's going to look like. You can actually browse this, I guess, however you want to pick fonts. There's, recommendations tab. You can see the trending fonts here at the top. So there's a lot of ways you can kind of look through and find some font inspiration. I personally like to go to Browse All. And then the nice thing about Browse All is it opens up this sidebar for you. So this lets you kind of filter through the fonts based on look and feel and, different properties. I like to start here with tags. That's what I mean when I say look and feel. You can see there's like holidays. You can pick things that are, rounded style fonts, funky fonts, all kinds of things. You can click on view more to get all the tags kind of opened up that are available for you. Holidays would work really well for the theme for today. But I'm actually going to pick cursive, because I want this to have kind of a hand fontspiration. Rick is saying, yeah, exactly. But I wanted to have kind of a handwritten feel because it's a postcard. And so I'm going to open up cursive here. And then from there, in order for this effect to really work and look really nice, I'm actually going to also filter by properties down here. You can see you can pick different properties of the font. Does it have, heavier weights, lighter weights? I'm going to pick a heavier weight. Is it wider, more narrow? So you can feel free to pick these based on what you kind of want, but I'm going to tell you right now, for today, a heavier weight font is going to help with this effect. So now that we've done that, the other thing, and this is just kind of a pro tip, or what I like to do, is I like to sort by newest. You don't have to, featured is fine, but I like to just kind of see what fonts are new on Adobe Fonts. So once we do that, you could use really any of these fonts. I think they'd all kind of work. They all kind of have that look and feel that I'm going for. I like this Thirsty script here. I've got this one already. You can see all I did was click on that Add Family, and it'll give you a little pop-up telling you that it's going to load those into your Creative Cloud app and allow you to use them across the different Adobe software, Photoshop, Illustrator, etc. And then down here, you can see I've already added this one. I think this will be really nice, but you can really pick any of these, honestly. I think they would all mostly work. So back over in Illustrator, now we actually use our type. So I'm going to grab the type tool, which coincidentally has this little T in the toolbar. And there's actually two ways you can work with the type tool. If I click once, that's going to create something called point type. And we'll get back to this in a second, because the other way you can work with this is you can click and you can drag. And when you do that, you're actually going to create something called area type. And what's the difference between these two? Well, with the selection tool, if I click on my point type here and I start to drag my bounding box, it's going to scale the actual type itself. If I hold down Shift, that's going to constrain my type so I'm not creating weirdly stretched or upside down text. So I would recommend holding down Shift. And then over here, if I click on this area type with the selection tool, if I grab and I scale this bounding box, what's actually going to happen is it's going to change the container size for my text. My text isn't going to change at all. And that can be really handy if you're, doing the bonus challenge here and designing the back of the card. If you want to kind of fit it between the guides, this is a great way to do that. But if you want to change the font size, over here in the contextual toolbar or up in the control bar, you can just change it by using the size drop down for the character in the character panel. So you can go ahead and scale it that way. It won't scale if you drag this box. It scales only by changing the actual font size in the drop down there. So that's the main difference. A couple of other things, speaking of the type that we're going to do here, we need to apply our font style. So again, two ways you can do that, either from the character menu here or from the contextual bar. I'm going to start to type out that font that I picked earlier, that Sant Elia, I believe is how you pronounce that. And I'm going to go ahead and pick the heaviest version of this font. So this is going to be Sant Elia Script Black. And then I'm going to type in some just like placeholder text for now. Feel free in the chat to provide some suggestions for what the copy should say on the front of our postcard here. I'm going to type in holiday cheer. And I'm actually going to set this on 2 lines. So I'm going to click to move my cursor back to the space between these 2 lines, delete that space, and then I'm going to hit return or enter to create a line break essentially for that text. And then since this is going to be kind of like centered on my card, I'm going to go ahead up here under paragraph, and I'm going to choose align center. So I'm going to change the paragraph alignment to be center there. And you can see I've got these little magenta indicators to help me kind of snap my text into place. Those are under view smart guides, and smart guides are checked on. So if you are wondering what those are and you want to work with those, you can go ahead and turn those on. I pretty much always work with them turned on, so there we go. The other thing I want to point out, which I didn't point out earlier, if you're not seeing the layers panel, any of the panels that I'm working with in Illustrator can be found under this window dropdown. So anywhere that you've got a panel checked, that means that it's currently already open. So you can go ahead and you can just grab any of the layer. If you don't see your layers panel, let's say it's not visible, you can go up to window and just make sure it's checked on. It's going to be opened up for you. All right, so now that we've got our type, also if you're joining live, let me know if you have any suggestions for the copy. Like I said, we've got a live chat on Behance and on YouTube. That's where I've been saying hi to some folks. You can also post on the replays on YouTube as well if you've got questions later. And the replays also is always available for you if you want to rewatch as you practice. So to create this halftone effect, there's a few ways that you can do it. And basically, we need to create a transition from lighter to darker values. So, we're going to be working with grayscale today primarily, but light to dark. So to keep this text editable, we're going to be doing this all in the appearance panel. And I know it's a little bit scary, but I promise you it's going to be, we're going to just stick with me. So the appearance panel is over here. I'm going to pull it out so it's a little bit easier to see and make it a little bit bigger. If you're not seeing it, you can find it under window. It's near the top. This is all in alphabetical. You can pop open the appearance panel. And with my type selected, down here at the bottom, these are different attributes I can add to my type. So I can add another stroke, I can add another fill, and I can add effects. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a fill. You're going to see that it's going to add that fill into my appearance panel. And for the time being, I'm going to go over to gradients, and I'm just going to go ahead and add a gradient to this. So I've got a radial gradient, so it's darker on the outside, darker values on the outside, lighter values on the inside here, just to kind of demonstrate how this, effect works. So we've got our fill. I'm going to go down to effects now, and under effects, we can add our pixelate color halftone. Now, when I do that, nothing's going to happen at first. Unfortunately, this effect doesn't have a preview option, but since we're using the appearance panel, we can go back and edit this as needed. I find that setting all these values to the same number works well in terms of the size and the spacing of my halftone dots, but you at least want to set all of these channel values to be the same value. So to give you an example, I'm going to set all of these to 50 to get started. And the larger the number for these values, the larger your dots are going to be. So if we use 50 and I hit OK, we've got enormous dots. You can barely even see them because they occupy all of my text. So to edit this effect, you can see it added a color halftone to my appearance panel under the fill. So I can just click on that so I can edit it again. And this time I'm going to type a much smaller number. I'm going to go with 5. And when I do that and I hit OK, now we can see our dots. They're smaller, so they're more visible, right? It's a little bit easier to see. Now, there's something that I want to point out here, and I did this on purpose. You may be saying, Jack, the effect looks terrible. Right. So this color halftone is a raster effect, and the raster effects preview appearance is controlled by the document raster effects settings. So under the effects drop-down menu, there's this document raster effects settings, and you can see that currently I've got it set to 72, so it's low resolution. I'm going to go ahead, and when I bump that up to high resolution and I hit OK, you're going to notice that preview is going to clean up right away. So if you ever have this problem where your effects are previewing and they look kind of bad, like pixelated, you just want to go and change that setting. All right, so like I said, the halftone effect works on values. So if I go ahead and I just hide, just like I hid my layer, if I go ahead and hide that effect briefly, you can see perfectly clear here that the outside edges, if I turn that back on, those dots are more dense, so they're darker. And then at the center, as it transitions, those dots are fewer and they get lighter. So this is a great way to kind of demonstrate that those values are what affect the density of the dots. So with kind of that knowledge in mind, we can actually use a blur instead of a gradient fill on this. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to click on this button here that says clear appearance, and that's going to get rid of all the appearance attributes that I already added. And this time I'm going to go to effects and I'm going to add a blur. So when we create a blur, right, we get those soft edges by having the transition go from like a darker value to a lighter value. So feel free to go down to the blur effects and use any of these. You could use a Gaussian blur or a Gaussian blur, however you pronounce that. Radial blur. I'm going to use the radial blur today because I think you can do some fun things with it. Unfortunately, this one also doesn't give you a preview, but you can kind of get an idea of what it's going to do based on what this little diagram is showing you here at the center. So you can have spin, which is going to create kind of like a blur in a circle around the outside of my text, or you can choose zoom, which is going to create kind of like a light speed, hyper light, zoom effect, like a motion blur kind of. And the more you increase this amount slider, the more intense that blur is going to be. Now, you could feel free to use however strong or not strong you want this blur. I would recommend keeping it relatively low, just because you want the text to be able to still be legible. And a little bit goes a long way. So I'm going to bring it back down. I think I have it set to like 20, let's say 24 right now. And I'm going to hit OK. And you can see right away what that effect does. The outside, it's kind of like zooming in to the center, which is more in focus. So if you wanted to go back and edit any of these effects, again, in the appearance panel, you can just click on this. And let's say I wanted it to be a little bit less. I can bring it down. So you can adjust this. It's all kind of stuff that's staying live and editable as we go. Now, there is one more step we need to do here, and I'm going to explain why. If I pull this text off, it's transparent. When we used our gradient, it was we had darker to lighter values. It was black to white here. We don't have anything kind of behind this, so Illustrator doesn't know that there's like a white to black value here. So in order to kind of create that, we need to add another effect. So we're going to go down into effects and we're going to choose Rasterize. And I'm going to make sure that I set my background to be white so that I tell Illustrator that there are all of those values to work with. The transparency is not going to work with the color halftone. It needs to have a white value behind it. So we're going to, or a light value. So we're also going to set our resolution to 300. And I'm going to hit OK. And then we can finally go down to effects. We can go to our pixelate. We can choose our color halftone. I'm just going to leave these values I had before, all 5s. Hit OK. And now, if we zoom in here, we can see that if I hide and show that effect, that we have anywhere that blur, that soft edge, is going to have lighter density of dots. So we can create that kind of like cool halftone effect on the edges of our text. Anywhere that you've got that softer transition on your blur is going to kind of create a transition of those halftone dots. All right, so we've got our text set up, and this is all still editable, by the way. So if I double click in here, I can go ahead and continue to type if I wanted to change this. I don't think we have any suggestions in the chat yet, so I'm going to go ahead and just type like happy holidays. At this stage, all of this is editable. I can even go back to my radial blur and I can increase the amount if I wanted to, or decrease the amount, and it's going to change my text live. So this is still a live effect at this point. We've got a question over, what does Rasterize do? Because I hear people mentioning it all the time. So right now we're working in vector, which is using like objects and paths, and Rasterize is going to work, is art created with pixels, right? So if we save this out as a PNG or JPEG, that's going to be raster art. We won't have any vector paths anymore. In this case, it's benefiting us because it's adding a white background so that we have those values that we can use to create that transition when we add the color halftone to it. That's a great question, though. Speaking of color, we're going to start to add some to our file now. So we've got this postcard, we've got this bleed on it, and I want to talk a minute about bleed and about print. So this is a postcard that we're going to be printing, and this red line on the outside, we talked about the pink line, those are our guides, and this red line is called a bleed. When you print something, if you want it to print edge to edge, you're going to add this little bit of bleed that extends outside of your artboard, so when it gets cut to the artboard size, which is the size of your final printed document, you don't have any kind of white space, right? It's going to print your design edge to edge. So if you wanted to turn that on or off, in your document setup here, you just bring that bleed down to 0, or you can increase it up. I think it goes in like quarter-inch increments, since I have this set to inches currently. No, this is 1/8 inch increments. Anyways, I want to create a box with the rectangle tool. If you don't see a rectangle tool, in your shapes tool, if you hold down, you'll get access to all of your shape tools here. And if we click in the upper left corner, we want to drag from the bleed all the way to the opposite side, the bleed there. And then we're going to go, I'm actually going to grab a color so it's a little bit easier to see this next part. So I'm going to grab my eyedropper. I'm just going to grab my green here from my color palette. We're going to go to Object, Arrange, and we're going to send this to the back. Not Object, Send to Back. We want Object, Arrange, Send to Back, not Send Backward. There we go. We want it to go all the way behind. So now you can see that our rectangle for our background extends all the way edge to edge of our bleed, so that when it gets trimmed, it's going to, not have any white space. But we do have some white space, because our design here this halftone effect relies on that white background. So it's a little bit of a problem, right? So we need to kind of deal with that. And we can deal with that by using an image trace. So we're going to go, oh, hello, Wade. How's it going? Clever Clever singing a song for us. It's beginning to look a lot like brisket. Is that the recommendation for our text? So we're going to use an image trace to get rid of this white background. So we're going to go back from being raster art now to vector art. So we're going to go to Window, and I like to open up the image trace panel first, because I find I'm always going to end up working in here and adjusting these settings. So I just open it up from there. You can get to it just by clicking on image trace once we expand the appearance on this, but I like to have the panel open preemptively. All right, so you'll notice I can't actually use image trace yet, right? Because I still have the appearance, the effects are still live effects in the appearance panel. This rasterize was added as an effect. So this is still live type. So if you want to continue editing your type, make sure that you make all of those changes before we do this next step. In order to use image trace, we need to expand all of the appearance attributes. So we're going to go to Object, Expand Appearance. And when I do that, it's going to take that rasterize effect, and it's actually going to rasterize my artwork. So now you can see here, I've got an image, it says image, pixels. Now we have raster artwork to work with, and we need to image trace it. So once we do that, and we make that, a flattened, remove all those appearance effects, and we make it, flat with the expand appearance, we can now interact with this image trace panel, and we can go to preview. I like to turn preview on first because I like to be able to see what I'm doing. So once I hit preview, now it's actually applying an image trace and I can make adjustments to these settings. I have it set to black and white mode. If it's set to something else, you can go ahead and switch under mode here to black and white because we're really only working with black and white values for this. And then the other thing that I want to do here, I'm going to open up the advanced tab. I know there's a lot of stuff in here, but once you kind of understand what's going on, it's a little bit less intimidating. We're only going to look at a couple of things in here. Raster that raster, yeah, unicorn. So the first thing that we want to do is I'm going to go down here. Actually, I'm going to leave that step for last. I changed my mind. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to reduce the noise. So I'm going to pull this, well, we're actually going to increase the noise. I'm going to reduce the noise slider down to the lowest possible value. The reason I want to do that is noise, in this case, it's considering noise to be my halftone dots, and I want to keep as much of that as possible. So setting it down to 0 tells image trace, no, don't remove the noise. I want to keep as much of it as possible. The other thing that I want to do, and I'm going to zoom in here, I want to soften these corners. So I'm going to reduce the number of corners, and that's just going to round out anywhere if I zoom in, where I've got these sort of I had these sort of square shapes. I don't want to have hard edges on this. I want to have just round halftone dots. So we're going to pull that down. And then the last thing I'm going to do here is make sure that I go down to where it says ignore color. And I'm going to check that on. And that's going to go ahead and remove the background for me. By default, it should switch when you hit ignore color to white. If it doesn't, and for some reason you're seeing something like this, just make sure you grab that eyedropper and select the white. You want to remove the background from this. So we only want to have our text here. And once you've got everything, it should look something like this. We're going to go ahead and hit expand. And what expand is going to do is it's going to take our raster artwork that we've applied an image trace, we've set up all of our settings, and we've hit expand. We're going to go back to vector paths. So we've gone full circle here and taken our design back to being vector. But this time we've got all of those halftone shapes there. With the eyedropper, now that I've made this vector again, I can go ahead and apply color to this. So we've got our color applied to our design. If we wanted to, I forgot to show this. We could also add a, let's go back out to this. We could also add a warp to this. So I'm going to go back out, back to the beginning before we change all these settings. You know what, we'll leave it. We'll leave it. You could also add a warp effect to this if you wanted to, so you can stack another effect on this appearance panel. But we could also do it after the fact, after we kind of created our text here. So we can go to effects, warp, and we can add a little bit of a rise on this, since this is going to be like a script text. I think that'll look nice with this. If you go to, if you open up warp here, so we go to effects, warp, it doesn't matter which one of these that you pick here. You can change it from the drop down. So if we go down to, if we open up arc by accident, we want to switch to rise, we can very easily just switch to it from there. And then you can drag this slider to adjust the amount. If you go in the opposite direction to the negative values, it's actually going to apply that going the opposite direction. So we have a bend now starting from the top and going down versus having a bend that starts from the bottom and rising up. So you can kind of adjust as you see fit. All right, I'm going to close some of these windows because they're getting a little crazy. We have our text here, and if you wanted to, we could go ahead and we can continue to add, and I would recommend this, I would add some shapes to the background to kind of fill it out. So if you grab your pen tool, we can kind of create some nice, like, I don't know, kind of like blobs. Remember that anything outside of the artboard isn't going to save with your file, so it's fine to have things kind of outside the edges. If we go over here, again, start with a black fill. We can add our effect. We can add a blur to this. We can go over here. In this case, I would probably just go ahead and add the, we'll add a rasterize, white. Okay, there we go. And then we could add our pixelate, color halftone. Okay. And we can go ahead and we could add our image trace and create kind of like multiple shapes on here. So let's go to object, expand appearance. We're going to image trace this, hit OK. And now you can see we've got our dots here. Oh, you know what? I didn't expand. Let's expand. So I'm doing this relatively quickly, so I'm not going through all the settings. We could add like a halftone. I think I probably needed to go in. Let's go back. And open up that window. We'll bring noise down. And then we'll say ignore color and hit trace. And from here, yeah, negative values unrise. Correct. All right, so now we've got our shape. We'll expand it, and we'll go ahead and grab, you know, maybe we'll go with like a lighter color. We can decrease the transparency a little bit. So you can add some additional details to the background using the same technique to kind of build out the rest of this design. But if you, let's say you were kind of finished with this, I'll copy and paste this and move it around so we kind of build this out a little bit, right? And then we can go to, where do we go? File, export, export for screens. And when we do that, we're going to get the front and the back artboards. So both are going to export out. And then you're going to want to make sure that you choose the location that you want to save it to. So we're just going to save it to our desktop. And then down here under options for formats, PNG or JPEG are going to be fine for saving to our Illustrator Discord. So the one thing I want to point out is you're saving a PNG, open up the advanced settings and make sure that you choose if you want to have a white background or transparent, depending on what your intended uses for this PNG. If you want transparency, make sure you change it there. It's not important since in this case we have a background that we've added. And then we're going to hit export. It's going to save it to the location that we chose. And then we can navigate to our Illustrator Discord. The link is in the description below this video. And then under Daily Creative Challenge, DCC feedback, you can go ahead and you can throw your image in here. We can say this is December 1st challenge. And you can get feedback from everybody in the community about your work. I would probably. But thank you so much for hanging out with me for an Illustrator typography challenge. We went over the appearance panel, halftone effect, image trace, type tools. We're live once a week on Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific on Behance and on the Adobe Live YouTube. And stay here for more live streams up next after me. Bye, everyone.